Hello, and welcome to the Movie Universe. I'm your host, Movie Fan. Today, I'll be talking about The Giant Claw. If you've never heard of it, it's okay. This is technically a B movie. In fact, I think by most standards, it probably hit the letter D, because this movie was not very well received. Why? Oh, you'll find out in a minute. The story begins with engineer Mitch McAfee doing radar tests for the Air Force, and while he was doing the tests, he spots a UFO faster than the jet that he was flying. But the Air Force's radar picks up nothing, and when they send out planes to try to intercept it, it's gone. And because nothing was picked up on the radar, and there was nothing to be found, nobody believes him. Not the Air Force, not even the beautiful mathematician Sally Cadwell, who was helping him with this project, believes him. Days go by, and all of a sudden things are starting to happen. Planes are starting to disappear without reason. At the same time, Mitch and Sally are getting a little closer, if you know what I mean. Then after about a few weeks, they figure out how they can find out what it is. In the vicinity of a last attack, there were weather balloons equipped with cameras. They get those balloons, and they check the film, and there they find a giant bird. A bird as big as a battleship, and ugly as sin. For the rest of the movie, they're trying to shoot this bird down, but everything they shoot at it doesn't affect it at all. Every missile, bullet, rocket, it just evaporates right in front of the bird. Mitch and Sally are doing everything they can to try to figure out what the heck is this bird? Where did it come from? And most importantly, how can they stop it? They work closely with the military, mostly with one man in particular, the General of the Air Force. After many failed attempts to shoot it down, they did find the bird's feathers in a piece of wreckage from a plane that it brought down. And after extensive analysis, they determined that the bird was from outer space. And somehow, it was able to project an antimatter force field, therefore shielding itself from our bullets and missiles. How is that possible? Well, it's actually quite simple. Everything on this planet is made of matter. Antimatter is the exact opposite of matter, and when matter and antimatter collide, they annihilate each other. In this case, somehow the bird was able to project a force field of antimatter, and the bird could even somehow turn it on and off for when it chooses to use its beak and claws. But whenever we were firing rockets at it, it had its shield up. This antimatter force field is also the reason why the radar wasn't picking up the bird. Now that they know what they got, the problem is now what are they going to do about it? First, the general orders that all planes be grounded, but the bird ends up attacking the ground. It attacks trucks, trains, anything moving on the ground. It goes after it. Sally, in fact, figures out what the bird is doing here. It's here to build a nest. Obviously, they can't let that happen. So they look for the nest, which they do find, and with a high-powered rifle, they destroy the eggs before they could hatch, or before Mama could project her force field. But because of this, the bird goes wild and really starts attacking everything, even more fiercely than it was earlier. Fortunately, Mitch comes up with an idea to stop the bird. First, they got to get rid of the shield. Once they get rid of the shield, the bird should be vulnerable, at least in theory. So Mitch and Sally do a lot of work on a device that would hopefully knock out the bird's shield. They do finish the project, and it does work. Now they have to get that bird. They attach the device onto a bomber, and when the bird is attacking a building, they go after it. First, they zoom around the bird to try to coax it into the air, because obviously they can't do it here. There's no telling what'll happen if they do. And when the bird chases them, Mitch fires the device, and it knocks out the bird's shield. Then they destroy the bird with rocket fire. And the last thing we see is its claw as it's going down into the ocean. A very simple story, but it's actually pretty interesting. Mostly because, believe it or not, this has a pretty well-known cast. Mitch McAfee is played by Jeff Morrow. He's well known in quite a few movies like The Creature Walks Among Us, and he's credited as playing Exeter from the classic film This Island Earth. Sally is played by the beautiful Mara Corday. She too has been in a ton of films, real classics too, like Tarantula, The Black Scorpion, and the Clint Eastwood movie Sudden Impact. She's also credited as being a showgirl, a model, and a Playboy playmate. The general is played by famous actor Morris Ankrum. You may not know the name, but you actually know the face because this guy was everywhere, playing generals, cowboys, even judges. You would probably recognize him as the general from Earth versus the Flying Saucers. And you would definitely recognize him as Judge Bates from the hit series Perry Mason. What's even more interesting is how the characters play their parts. They play their parts absolutely perfectly and professionally. You just watch them do their thing and you could tell they're taking their roles very seriously. Now I know what you're going to ask me. How is it that they're taking their roles seriously? I mean, look at the bird. The bird is absolutely pathetic. Well, believe it or not, they had absolutely no idea what this thing was going to look like. Audiences make one mistake when it comes to movies. They automatically assume that the actors and actresses know what the creature or the monster or the giant bird or whatever the special effect may be is going to look like, when truth is they don't. At least not when it comes to films like this. Often at times they're just told to act scared, act brave, act whatever, you know? But truth be told, they're acting at nothing, so they really don't know what to expect. That was a moment that I'm sure the cast lived to regret, because when this film premiered in Hollywood, the crowd bursted with laughter, and it was so humiliating that Jeff Moreau tried to sneak out. I use the word tried for a reason. Now, I'm sure you've already figured out what it was that kept this movie from becoming a classic. Obviously, it was the special effect that was the bird itself. I know that when you look at this thing, you just want to laugh. And I don't blame you. This bird is extremely laughable. This thing is supposed to be so menacing, a terror to mankind, the bane of our existence, and possibly our doom. And yet, I cannot help but snicker every time I look at this thing. Now I know what you're going to ask. Whose bright idea was it to have a bird this pathetic? And where did it come from? The answer, of course, is quite simple. It was the producer's fault. His name was Sam Katzman, and this guy was big into making low-budget films. This guy was so cheap that it's almost baffling. He decided to make this bird on an extremely low budget. In fact, he actually went to Mexico and found a puppet maker who created this very phony baloney looking puppet. And it is because of this that this movie got no real credibility at all. And that's really quite sad because the story is actually really solid. In fact, I would go so far as to say that since the story is so solid and they had a great cast, it actually supersedes how lame that bird really is. But as usual, anything I could say about the actors' capabilities that I can talk about really won't do them any justice. You would actually have to see this movie for yourself to really appreciate the work that our actors and actress did for this film. Even though that bird is extremely lame to look at, so lame that I cannot help but laugh every time I look at this thing, the movie is still very entertaining. And these days, it has actually become a cult classic. So if you ever get the time, look it up. You might actually like it. That is, if you can stop laughing for 5 minutes whenever you see that bird. Either way, I would say give it a chance. You might actually find this movie to be more entertaining than you'd think. This is Movie Fan, signing off.